All right, sounds good.
Good morning, one and all. I would say members take your seat, but they are incredibly timely this morning. You all get a little bit of stars. First session of the year, first meeting of the year, and so forth. Well, welcome back. This is Transportation Subcommittee 1. In case you want to go over and argue about courts or sewer water or something, you're probably not in the right place. So, our committee composition is the same it's been, except I see we have a new gentleman on the end that's joining us. Doug, please introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, sir.
Good morning, I'm David Toscano. I represent all of Charlottesville and part of Albemarle County in Central Virginia. And I'm glad to be back on the committee after being gone for a couple of years. Hope I haven't forgotten anything.
Doug Toscano, we're glad to have you back on board. We now have a counterbalance to other legal brain over here to my right, so we thank you for that. Well, this is the first session for Transportation Subcommittee number 1 for 2019. As you all know, this is a short session, we're only 46 days, and there will be 3 meetings that are scheduled thus far for this subcommittee. There are a lot of bills that have been introduced, a lot of conversations that need to be had in the Commonwealth to make sure that we get it right and in the concept of prudent public policy that we all are about. So first meeting, if we can get some of these bills sort of done, that's a good thing. But I would remind the committee members in the audience that we will get time compressed as we get sort of closer. So I heartily encourage all of institutional Richmond to weigh in with your patrons for or against, and make sure that your act is together. Thank you. First order of business, because there may be some that have come to speak to it, Delegate Weber has asked that his House Bill 1872 dealing with protective helmets on motorcycles and autocycles be taken by for the day. Yes, well, I think they weren't ready for prime time, or they hadn't had their act together quite yet. So without objection and by general consensus, House Bill 1872 is by for the day. And I would remind the audience, if any of you all drove 2 or 3 hours to speak to it, I respect that. If you cannot come back when the meeting is scheduled again, I would suggest you submit your comments in writing. They will be received by each of the committee members and noted as well. So, all right. First on our docket today is House Bill 1802, patroned by Delegate Tyler. Committee, I'll draw your attention to House Bill 1802. Delegate, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
If you would let us know why we need your bill and what your bill does, please.
All right. House Bill 1802 will allow the amber warning lights on vehicles hauling forest products. Basically, this bill is presented at the request of the Virginia Loggers Association. Many of the Virginia loggers voluntarily equip their tractor, truck, semi-trailer, and forest product loads with additional flashing amber light at the end of the load. You know, this is a big flashing light on the end. The amber lights on the end of the load helps to prevent accidents and slow down the motorists as they approach the log trucks from behind. Additionally, the lights create high visibility during inclement weather and add safety for the motorists. The insurance company and the logging business owners prefer the added safety created by the amber light on the end of the load. However, the practice is not listed in exemption under the section of the code, therefore is subject to citation. Therefore, this bill allows amber warning lights on vehicle hauling forest products. And this amendment was drafted, confirmed with the state police captain, and I also have Ron Jenkins, Executive Director of the Virginia Loggers Association, to speak to the bill at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you much, Delegate. Any members have any questions for Delegate Watson?
So, Delegate, so that you're not supposed to do it now, but most of them do it.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I was
Yes,
just trying to figure that out because I thought it was law now. Okay,
It's
thank
not
you.
in law, and sometimes you get citations, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Anyone in the audience here to speak in favor of House Bill 1802? Yes, sir, if you would please identify yourself.
Good morning, Mr.
Morning.
Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Ron Jenkins, Virginia Loggers Association Executive Director. Members of the VLA, of Virginia Loggers Association, requested that we submit this bill or ask a patron to do so for us, and we have one in the House and the Senate. They voluntarily suggested that the additional cost to them is well worth the extra safety that they would find on the highways. And indeed, our insurance companies, of which are members and also support many of our logging companies, are in favor of this. We'd like to seek it to be an option to do it at our expense, but not make it mandatory.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in favor? House Bill 1802? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Susan Seward with the Virginia Forest Products Association. We also strongly support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone in the audience to speak in opposition to House Bill 1802? VSB, what sayeth thou?
Mr. Chairman, Ron Maxey, Virginia State Police. We did have a chance to review the bill before the session. We have no concerns with the language.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. All right. No one else to speak in the matter rests with the committee?
Move to report. Question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Delegate Watt.
Perhaps for Mr. Maxey from State Police, is there something unique about logging vehicles that makes this more appropriate than, say, any other vehicle, big heavy tractor trailer or whatever?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Rock, no, sir. It is something that we've identified out there. Law enforcement's aware that it's a safety issue. Speaking to Mr. Jenkins, insurance encourages these businesses to run a yellow light on the back. We can see the safety benefit from it. It just wasn't allowed prior to this, and that's why they proposed the legislation.
All right. Anything else? Been properly moved and seconded that House Bill 1802 be reported. The members would vote on the electronic voting record. Is everyone card delivery?
Pushed mine a number of times, but it's not doing it. Then it got a little red X that says the procedure entry point, access. could not be located.
So not only the people are early, but the machines are early. I'll mark you as a delegate. Are you a yay or a nay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Measure reports in on a 10-0 vote. Delegate, you do not need, I'm sorry. Delegate, you do not need to be at full House transportation. If the issue starts going sideways for any reason, I'll hold back and I'll find you. But
Okay, thank you so much.
absolutely, Delegate. Thank you very
members
much.
of the committee.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Delegate Tusker.
I'd like the record to reflect that I think Delegate Delaney is no longer on this subcommittee. I saw her name pop up on the board. We don't want to give anybody any idea that she's not coming to subcommittee meetings because her name's up on the board, she's not voting, but I don't think she's on the subcommittee anymore. I actually took her name down so nobody would affect her.
All right, so
And
thank
she's
you.
here.
I see, she is Jezebel. All right, very well. Okay, next, Delegate Head, House Bill 1602, draw the committee's attention. Morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1662 was brought to me by the Chief of Police of the town of Benton. He found himself in a situation where there was an incident, a child was needing to be transported, there was nobody that could do it except for the officer that was on the scene, and there was no car seat to be able to transport the child. And interestingly enough, school bus, taxi, a limousine do not require car seats, but he realized that in order to do his job, he was going to have to break the law. And contacted me and said, this is not probably a big deal, but it could be, and we would really like to make sure that this is given some flexibility. And so the suggestion was that we make any emergency services vehicle, even though I understand that in the case of ambulances and fire equipment, fire trucks, most of them always carry car seats for just such an event as this. Police officers don't, but in the event that there is some incident somewhere where in the performance of their official duties, the officer or the emergency personnel is not able to transport a child legally, this just gives them the opportunity in the process of their duties to do that. And I say that because I neglected, Mr. Chairman, there is a substitute that we have drafted that adds that language to that. And so I apologize for not starting with that. And in the substitute, the only language change would be on line 40, while in performance of their official duties.
Okay. Members have it before them. And it's been electronically released as well. All right. Without objection and by general consensus, the substitute is properly before us.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. At any rate, that is the substance of the bill. Is very simple, but just allows them to do legally what they from time to time need to do, just as a course of their business.
All right, sir. Members have any questions of the patron? No? All right. Is anyone in the audience to speak in favor of House Bill 1662? Is anyone in the audience to speak in opposition to House Bill 1662?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a quick look. I went by your office yesterday and talked to your staffer. I just wanted to see what the language was. Amy Kern Cyber on behalf of the Virginia chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics. So we were just concerned because we know that the OEMS is doing a really good job of trying to get all their ambulances outfitted for pediatric services. We just wanted to make sure that this wasn't going to set us back in that area. So I think making it be in the purpose of an emergency. It's actually in the performance of their official duties.
Right. And the reason that we chose that language instead of
Okay.
emergency was because from time to time, in the case of a police officer, for example, there could be a situation where if there's a roadside incident, there may not be an official emergency, but the child might still need to be transported for a short distance. What we wanted to avoid was having an officer who takes a car home for the evening being able to transport a child without having a car seat and taking a child back to school or something along that line. Needed to be under a specific circumstance.
Yeah, and that's what we were worried about too. I think we were just worried about, for example, like if you had to transport somebody for a long distance in the hopes that they would obviously put that child in a restraint in a child seat. But we understand their situation. That makes perfect sense. If you have to do it right around it. So I guess I just want to make sure that that language does that. So I think we'll have to keep talking about it, but it's fine at the moment. So.
All right.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Seibert. Anyone else to speak in opposition? Not the measure, salute committee.
Move the report. This has to be.
Been probably moved and seconded that House Bill 1662 as substituted be reported. Members will vote on your electronic voting record. Measure report passes on a 9-1 vote. And Delegate, I don't think you'll necessarily need to be there at our next meeting, but if it goes sideways, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. All right, next is Delegate Hurst, House Bill 1786. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
If you would tell us why we need your bill and what your bill does, please.
If I may first please disseminate a substitute for our bill, an amendment to the nature of the substitute, and then I should explain why we needed to do the substitute and also the problem we're trying to fix. But Emma has been great to work with, making sure that our language doesn't have overreach with unintended consequences and actually gets to the heart of the matter.
Who's had a chance to see this substitute? All right, without objection by general consensus, the substitute House Bill 1782 is properly before us. Please tell us, Delegate, why we need your bill and what your bill does as substituted, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. We need this bill in order to make sure that this particular part of the code section is actually in compliance with the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act and the Department of Justice guidance that dates back to 2010. So while this issue did come to my attention because of a constituent complaint, someone who has a disability who is not allowed to use what's considered an other-powered mobility device by a public entity, the public entity cited this particular code section as the rationale for why they were able to tell him that he was not able to use that OPDMD. And what we have found in working with groups like the Disability Law Center and ARC of Virginia is that actually, right now, this code section is not in compliance with the ADA because the ADA sets forward that anybody who does have a mobility disability and you can have credible assurance that is requested is allowed to use the OPDMD if a public entity wants to create a policy that allows for such use. So it wasn't really a prohibition because of the device itself or because of the nature of the incident. It was really more the fact that we actually don't expressly say in our code right now what is already in the federal ADA, and so this is trying to make sure that we have conformity with federal law.
All right, sir. Members have questions? Delegate Davis.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. Is there anything in our code that would prevent localities from allowing the use of any public mobility device on a sidewalk, not restricted just to disabilities? So if we wanted to give localities the ability to open this up for disabilities and others for OPD and Ds, I think I may have got that right. Can we just do that and not make them have to show proof of disability?
So the Department of Justice guidance that came out in 2010, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Davis, says that the use of other power-driven mobility devices says that a public entity shall make reasonable modifications in its policy, practices, or procedures to permit the use of an OPDMD by individuals with mobility devices, unless that public entity can demonstrate that the class of the OPDMD can be operated in accordance with legitimate safety requirements. And so the DOJ guidance goes on to list different assessment factors that a public entity is allowed to consider and when they want to place some restrictions or some allowances on these devices. The type, size, weight, dimension, speed of the device. It's probably practical to not allow for gas-powered vehicles to be able to be used inside. Also, too, the facility's volume of pedestrian traffic is part of the assessment criteria that a public entity is able to use in its determination of coming up with any policy. But again, as of right now, in Virginia Code, we don't allow for any prescription of any public entity to develop their own policy. It's actually prohibited, and so that's why we wanted to make sure that this substitute was introduced, and so that we make sure that a public entity can come up with a policy as long as it's in accordance with the ADA and Department of Justice guidance.
Mr. Chvala, Mr. Chairman?
Delegate.
So Delegate, I think that definitely gets to the heart of the question. So then, the way I understand the answer is that there obviously is a requirement that localities allow for the use of these devices, but nothing that would restrict a broader use of the devices. So if they were to allow those devices to be used by the general public or to be used without having to show proof of disability, that would still be in conjunction with that section of law. Would that be correct?
I don't believe so. I believe that you are only allowed to come up with a policy that permits OPDMDs for individuals with mobility disabilities. And that is something that the DMV requires the physicians sign off on a checkbox in order to be able to get what the DOJ, what the ADA consider to be qualifying credentials, essentially a state-issued mobility disability placard or a state-issued mobility disability identification. It does allow for there to be a verbal representation of a credible assurance that they have a mobility disability, but it just can't be contradicted by observable fact that a person claims that they have a mobility disability and yet somebody associated with that public entity saw them, walking around perfectly fine, but then was trying to use a moped on a sidewalk.
Maybe someone that, as a clarification, I don't know the lady that, I don't know from a legal standpoint if there's a difference. I apologize for the protocol.
You look like you have the answer.
At this time of the morning, I'm not sure I have any interest in anything. So, good morning. I'm Colleen Miller. I'm from the Disability Law Center. And I think that Delegate Davis's questions really highlight the need for this legislation. Because if you look at current code, there's a list of devices that are required to be allowed on sidewalks. And at least one significantly large public entity read that as a closed list, that those are the only devices that can be allowed on a public sidewalk. I think you can read the code differently. I think you can read it that that's just like suggestions or sort of like the minimum. But at least one very large entity read that as the only things that could be allowed. And that's the interpretation of code that puts it in conflict with the Americans with Disabilities.
One of the thought, Mr.
Delegate Davis.
Sorry. When the delegate was responding to my question, I don't know if you had a different interpretation, but can a locality be allowed to open up where you don't have to show proof of disability to be only? Can the locality say, we're going to allow OPDMDs to be able to use on our sidewalks, we're fine with that, without having for someone to flash their I'm disabled badge?
That's going to come down completely to the kind of counsel that entity, legal counsel that entity gets. At least some interpretation of the code says no. I don't read the code to be that restrictive, but at least one significantly large entity did read it. It got legal advice that said that that's a closed list, that they cannot allow anything else on.
Emma, I'm sure you have an answer to that question.
Mr. Chairman, I think I might have the answer to what Delegate Davis is getting at. I would like to clarify that in the definition of other power-driven mobility device, it's a mobility device that is used by an individual with a disability. So if a golf cart, or if a Segway is being used by somebody who does not have a disability, it is not an OPDMD by definition.
Gotcha, okay, that helped, okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Any? Anyone in the audience to speak in favor? We've heard from Ms. Miller. If those are your comments, if you have other comments, in favor?
Just that we support.
All right. Thank you
Mine
very
is
much.
that simple. Tanya Millen, the Director of Care of Virginia, and we support this bill for the freedom, obviously, that it gives people to have more opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in support? Anyone here not in opposition to House Bill 1786? BSP, what sayeth thou? Where'd Captain Maxey go?
So I'm trying to work with an issue here. Mr. Chairman, I'll admit, I heard none of that. I was working on previous bill.
How about law enforcement's ability to enforce having any of these power-driven mobility devices, four-wheelers, go-karts, golf
sidewalks?
Mr. Chairman, my opinion on this would be that we would be severely limited because we wouldn't be able to require the person to prove of any disability on the situation. So I think it would be difficult, although it would be more of a local issue that I think localities would handle more than the state police, but I do think it would be difficult due to the fact that we couldn't require proof.
All right, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else to speak? All right, if not, measure rest with the committee. Further questions? All right, further questions? Okay, before we move on, that's my only concern, Delegate Hurst, is I have a private road in my neighborhood. It's a public street, but there's a private road off of it. There's 6 families there. They've got golf carts, and the kids ever increasingly want to get their golf carts down and see all their buddies down on the rest of the private road. It's illegal to do so, but I can just see the challenges of having a lot of golf carts on our sidewalks, or 4-wheel drives, 4-wheel ATVs, all kinds of different devices. Totally get it about the disabled community. The challenge that I have is the difficulty I think it's going to be in sort of enforcing this. You mentioned your predicate was that we've got to do this in Virginia code to be in compliance with federal code and federal regs. We already have, our code already requires us to be in, we can't be in conflict with the federal code and federal regs. So if we had to put into Virginia code everything to acknowledge that we're going to stay in compliance with the federal code regs that are sort of abide by, then that seems to be we would have, we might as well just simply be taking into Virginia code and regs become the states, or U.S. code and regs become the states.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, as a response to that, I think that your points are valid and well taken. I think, as Emma Buck just said, that the actual definition of what qualifies as an OPDMD is tied to that individual user who must have a mobility disability, and you are able, as a public entity, to ask for credible assurance to make sure that mobility disability is in fact valid. And so while I think it is well taken that we already have parts of the code that talk about conformity, that we have already had one large public institution in my district interpret this part of Virginia code differently to the detriment of somebody with a disability. And so I think in order to make sure that all individuals with mobility disabilities throughout the Commonwealth wouldn't be subject to the same interpretation, that we would rather than express what a public entity can come up with as a policy, and then also to the definition of the OPDMD, and also further, someone who has a mobility disability with proper credentials.
All right, sir. All right, further discussion? Members can vote on their electronic voting record. And the measure reports on a 9-to-1 vote, sir. You probably don't necessarily need to be there on, if the vote to go sideways, I'll let you know, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr.
All right,
Chairman.
members, absolutely. All right, and Delegate Delaney, House Bill 1677. Good morning back to Sub 1. I figured we'd get you here at 7 a.m. regardless.
One way or the other, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to be here with you all again today.
Draw the committee's attention to House Bill 1677. If you would let us know why we need your bill and what your bill does, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So over the summer, I met with a local mechanic who works in my district, and he brought to my attention that he's unable to follow both the Virginia law and car manufacturer requirements when performing maintenance on vehicles that have expired registration tags. His situation was he was working on a vehicle that needed work on the catalytic converter. The tags had expired, but he needed to be able to reset the catalytic converter. So per Virginia's DEQ diagnostic test requirements, a vehicle must accelerate at half throttle until 55 miles an hour is reached and hold that speed of 55 miles an hour for at least 3 minutes, and then repeat the cycle once more. Currently, auto repair shops are provided a special license plate that allows mechanics to drive cars that have expired registration tags up to 5-mile radius from their shop. Yet in numerous auto repair shops in the Commonwealth, such as this constituent of mine, they're located more than 5 miles from roadways, which would legally allow them to drive over 55 miles an hour of the speed that is needed to complete an onboard diagnostic test. So this is essentially a common sense piece of legislation which brings our Virginia code up to the standard with the newer car technologies that we have today, where these computerized resets have to reach these speeds. So increasing the distance from 5 miles to 10 miles would just allow that flexibility for the cars to lawfully reach the speeds they need to reach in order to reset the computerized engines.
All right. Good evening, does have any questions? All right, is there anyone in the audience to speak in favor of House Bill 1677? Anyone here to speak in opposition to House Bill 1677? BSP, what saith thou?
Mr. Chairman, Ron Maxey, State Police has no concerns with the bill.
So folks that are on the highways don't have inspection stickers, they're going shorter distances, a little bit longer distances, not a problem. You guys can enforce it as long as you guys, that's fine. That's no problem. All right. Not a problem. All right, without any further input from the audience, the measure rests with the committee. Properly moved and seconded that House Bill 1677 be reported. Members should vote on electronic voting record. And the measure to report passes on a 10-0 vote. Elliot, you're still on transportation.
I'm still on
Just not
transportation.
second.
I just got moved to different subcommittee.
You will need to get that
I
committee.
will need to get that committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee.
Thank you for bringing this fine piece of legislation up. All right, that actually completes our docket today. As you all weren't here earlier, House Bill 1872 was taken by today by the patron. Members, we will have quite a number of bills that were not sort of in the hopper and already in the bosom of this committee prior to my posting this docket. We've got quite a number of bills, and I will remind the committee members we only have 2 more meetings in this short session. So get your Wheaties. We do have a hard stop time of 8:30 in the morning on Tuesday mornings for the full committee to come in and Bob to get a little bit of time to move over the computer. So I very much appreciate all the great work, and I say that as sincerely and honestly as I can, that you all do to study these bills and understand, have conversations with the patrons and with the community prior to our meetings. So anything else come before the committee? They shall rise.